this one, and that should be fine. I'm gonna go back there and make sure that's picking up. I think that's good. Give me 5 seconds. Just like talk to yourself.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me? Yeah. I think it's good.
Comfortable? And that one.
Quicker also. I think you have the 2 o'clock flight, right?
Yeah, so no, 3 o'clock. I think it's just before 3. So I'll leave around a little after 1 or something like that. Yeah.
If you want, you can just flip it off until you go up. All right.
2 minutes. Right? 2 minutes.
It's super straightforward. Once you're ready.
Okay. You just have to turn it on, right?
Yeah, you just
Right,
gotta flip
okay,
it up.
I'll take it.
Sweet. And I almost forgot this. All right. See you soon.
All right. I was going to put a countdown here, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, but we didn't decide against that. The space theme being what it is. Again, welcome to our Hassan Distinguished Lecture Series. We have another fantastic lecture lined up for you, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But before that, I want to thank all of you for coming and joining us for this, and it's become a very important annual meeting for our department and our community here at NC State. We also now made it extra special because we combine it with our annual Hall of Fame dinner, which is the previous night, and we have several Hall of Famers here, some of them wearing the red jackets. But we have some new inductees yesterday. I think some of them are here. Can you please stand? Oh, there. David is here. So he forgot his red jacket. And we are glad. And then we have a lot of our former Hall of Famers here. I think Basil and John. I think who else am I missing? Oh, yeah, Hassan is right there. Yeah. He's not wearing the red jacket, too. So, but again, thank you all for coming, and I think it's also going to be great for the students. We have a lot of our aerospace engineering students and a lot of our graduate students here who are very excited about this talk. A little quick background, Professor Hassan, a legend in our department, started in 1962 here, retired in 2016. Has been a very strong proponent for our aerospace program for many, many years. He has a huge legacy, and if you had come yesterday to our Hall of Fame dinner, you'll have heard his name over and over again and how he shaped many lives in our department. He also had this special passion to create a lecture series which will bring in prominent speakers from the aerospace community to come and talk to our students and our community here about the greatest and latest and the greatest things that are happening in the aerospace community. With that vision, in the first 4 years he was here, in fact, he would sit front and center of the talk and ask questions. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2020, and his son, who is also a 3-time alumni of our department, Dr. Basil Hassan, is carrying on the torch and helping me with continuing to bring fantastic speakers here. So again, thank you, Basil, for continuing to support this program and for this series, and also being a strong supporter of the aerospace program in the department. So with that, I'm going to introduce Basil Hassan to come and talk about our speaker today. Again, Basil, 3-time alumni and also Director of Research at Sandia. Is that correct?
All right, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here today. As Srinath mentioned, I'm Basil Hassan. I'm from Sandia National Labs, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today at the 2023 rendition of the Hassan A. Hassan Lecture. So welcome to all of you in the room. It's great we got such a big crowd, and welcome to all of you online. As Srinath mentioned, that this lecture commemorates my father, who spent more than 56 years here as a professor. He came in 1962 from Virginia Tech, and he followed Dr. Bob Truitt to come down here and establish an aerospace program within North Carolina. He was, as Srinath said, was very active until he completed phased retirement. But I want to really thank several people for helping to make this lecture possible, and they include some folks who are in the room, including Professors Mohammed Zikri, Rich Gould, Jack Edwards, and former NCSU Development Director Mike Walsh, and many former students and faculty who all contributed to endow this lecture, so thank you very much. He fully retired in 2018, and as Srinath said, passed shortly thereafter. So this lecture has been part of his legacy of being at NC State. And we've had a really long line of distinguished speakers. If any of you are interested, all of the past lectures are on YouTube, if you're interested in watching, but they have included people like John Anderson, Mr. Hypersonics from University of Maryland and the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, Nancy Curie-Gregg from NASA, Michimasa Fujino from Honda Aircraft Company just down the road in Greensboro, Nateri Madhavan from the NASA Aeronautics Program, former AE grad John Olds from SpaceWorks, who's here today, Bobby Braun, who was from JPL, who's now at the Applied Physics Lab, and then last year we had Ben Murphy from Boom Supersonic. And so, as you can read in the details of the program, my father was really dedicated to the success of this program. Its research, contributions to the profession, but more importantly to the students. And we have many of you here today, and I'm really glad to see it. I know he's watching from above, and he's probably smiling that you're all here. He's also supported the department in many ways, including creating some scholarships and fellowships, and then most recently, before his death, endowing the Hassan Professorship, and I'm glad to say that we have the first recipient of that, Dr. Farhan Gandhi, here today, and he will start in January. So let's move on. So today I'm really thrilled to introduce our distinguished speaker for today. He's a longtime friend and colleague, Dr. Prasen Desai. Prasen and I and others met in the late 1980s when we were graduate students at NASA Langley Research Center. Today he serves as the Acting Associate Administrator for Space Technology at NASA headquarters. He received his BS in Mechanical Engineering from Rutgers, Master's from the George Washington University, and PhD from the University of Illinois, where coincidentally my dad went to graduate school. He spent almost 2 decades at NASA Langley in the areas of atmospheric flight mechanics, spacecraft design and operations, and architect for many of the planetary missions that we've had to date, including several of the vehicles who've landed on Mars. He spent the last 13 years at NASA headquarters, where he was active in creating what is now the Space Technology Directorate, and in various leadership roles, he has helped chart the path forward for NASA in the space area. He is widely published. He's an associate fellow of AIAA, and among other awards, he's received the Presidential Rank Award and National Engineer of the Year Award from AIAA. So I think for many of us who grew up in aerospace, Prasen has lived the dream that many of us had to be able to greatly impact NASA's space missions over the years. For those of you who are getting ready to graduate and might have the same dream, he's a great example of someone who's not only been able to contribute technically to a variety of space missions, but now he's very active in charting the programs that will define the future for space technology. So he's really somebody to be admired and followed, and I'm thrilled that he was willing to come here and speak to us today. So without further ado, let's give Prasen a warm Wolfpack welcome and let him tell us all the great things about space technology at NASA.
Thank you. Thank you for that warm welcome. Can you hear me with the I'm going to stand in front of the podium. I never like being behind the podium in there. So it's really great to be here. It allowed me to get in touch with some of old colleagues. Colleagues, probably maybe a generous term when we got together. We were grad students, right? So long ago, and it's hard to believe all that time has gone by, right? And it feels like a different life, frankly. I lived a different lifetime ago. I think partly because many of us we're fortunate that we were able to get together and had passion for the types of stuff we were doing, right? And it was great to see some folks who went on to NASA as well as one of the honorees from last night. Good to see him. I hadn't seen him since I think the launch of one of the spacecraft we worked on 20 some odd years ago, right? There, and then John and I go way back too as grad students in the same building at NASA Langley. And so just from that, just reminiscing a little bit about that, it's really great to be back and talk about that. A lot of the volleyball games we had, the softball games, things like that just there. And so I guess one point before I even talk about this is bring that as very important. You probably are making long-term friendships right here and colleagues that you will see maybe 20 years later and remembering these times, right? And so keep that in mind, right? Space is a fairly niche sector still. And so you will see each other over your lifespans, as you go in your careers over in time. And so just keep that as something in the back of your mind. It's just amazing how people I come across that I ran into 20 years ago and still we remember each other and stuff. So this is a small community, even though the space sector has become so vibrant just in the last 5 years, right? So one thing that's not something you're going to learn in the textbook, right, from that perspective. So it's certainly great, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing at the Space Technology Mission Directorate and NASA going there. I don't know if many people know about how NASA is structured, so maybe I'll start with that a little bit. NASA has basically 4 product lines, if you want to talk business function-wise. It has the aeronautics product line, everything to do with aviation, right? This was former the NACA that NASA had before there was a NASA, doing all that thing to help aviation in the country. And so that's one of the pillars of NASA. The other one is human spaceflight, as you're all aware of, everything to do with shuttle in the years past. It's the space station now, all the things with Artemis going forward, right? So that's another product line. The third product line is our Science Mission Directorate that does everything robotic mission science for across the solar system, from low Earth orbit for Earth science to heliophysics to astrophysics, and the planetary ones that go deep into the solar system. And if you just saw maybe a couple of weeks ago, the OSIRIS-REx mission coming back after bringing back some asteroid samples, and that builds off what my colleague out there, Hall of Famer for you guys, Dr. Olnick there, and I worked on the predecessor of that, basically. So built off of what we did long ago to bring those samples back, right? So in many ways, it comes full circle from there. And then we are the newest mission director at NASA, 13 years old, the Space Technology Mission Director. And our charter really is to develop the next generation of space capabilities so that all our missions are more capable, more reliable, and hopefully more cost-effective as we go forward, right? So it's coming up with revolutionary next-generation capabilities that we all need for just not only NASA interest, but our charter is a little broader about national interest. So we look at what other government agencies are looking to do or want to do in this arena. Industry, we partner with industry quite a bit and work with them very much now, and very much academia. And so this is another reason why I'm here, is to try to give you an overview of how we engage with academia and how you all can engage with us to create these next generation capabilities that maybe you guys have the kernel of idea that we don't even know about yet, right? And how you can help shape the future of the space sector going forward. My career, I would say, is I've been very fortunate. I never planned any of it. I talked to a few of the students yesterday, and I just kind of told them that there's just a couple of things that you keep in mind. To me, the nuts and bolts is do good work, right? When you're asked to do something, do it. Try to do it within time. Earlier if you can, within budget if you can. And stuff like that. And people will notice. And if you have that with a conscientious attitude that you're there to help solve problems as opposed to be a difficult person in the process, let me tell you, that's refreshing. You will, someone who has a good attitude about things, no matter how bad things get, you will be noticed, because that is rare, frankly. And so, just little things like that will go a long way to that. And as a result, I would say opportunities open up for you. And that's kind of my career. I didn't plan any of this. When I was a kid, I never even thought about working for NASA. I really like space stuff. And, I decided to come to grad school to do that. And from that, everything built off of that from that perspective. Never dreamed about landing anything on Mars, let alone 3 things, right? And stuff. So, there is, yesterday one of the speakers or honorees that was honored talked about the luck. There is luck involved, timing aspect of it. But in my view, if you prepare yourself, you're making that luck also. And you're ready for the opportunities that come through. And so that's one of the overarching messages I guess I will leave with you today, is to kind of just think about it from that perspective, that you're cultivating your capabilities while you're here. And preparing yourself for these opportunities that you will never even know about, right? And I'll talk about that, how I switched from a little bit from completely technical to what I do now, which if you ask me to integrate an equation, I could not do it right now anymore, right? But things happen, and we can certainly talk about that, about how those things are. But first, I wanted to give you an overview of what we're doing in the NASA space technology. I think it's an exciting time that you all are embarking in the world. When we went to grad school and stuff, NASA was the only game in town, right? 20, 30 years ago, space was a purview of a handful of governments, right? You needed government resources to do these types of things. That's no longer the case. Now, 10 years, you start seeing changes from a private sector, and certainly in the last 5 years, it's just booming, right? And so you're going into a world that you have a lot of opportunities, right? And so you're not don't need to just think about NASA. You can think about how to make things happen in the private sector as well, because we are partnering with the private sector to enable the future that we as a nation would want in this arena going forward. And we play that part in that aspect. The organization I'm part of, Space Tech, we don't do our own missions. We're not the ones going to outer planets. We're not the ones doing human space flight on the moon. But what we are here to do is to provide capabilities so they can do those things, right? And so internally, we view them as customers of ours. What do they need, and how do we enable that going forward to make it easier for them? Retire the risks of new technology so that they can adopt it. The physics has been retired so that they can just incorporate it, infuse it into their missions, and go forward with it. So that's why we're here, and as well as industry going forward, right? We have 10 programs, and I outlined in these 4 buckets of early stage innovation and partnerships, our small business innovative research programs, our technology maturation programs, and our tech demonstration programs. And if you look at it, they kind of span what we term in technology development as a technology readiness level, TRL. You may be not familiar with that, but that's how we measure how mature a technology is. Where TRL 1 is immature, it's just an idea. And then over time, as you mature it to higher and higher TRLs, you get it to a capability that you can start relying on and infusing. And so TRL 9 is an operational system. So you go from an idea all the way to TRL 9 where it's infused into something that is working, right? And so our job is to take these ideas, cultivate them, the ones that seem to have some promise, work on them in the lab to see if it will pan out. And if they do pan out in the lab, maybe go fly it and test it out so then someone can adopt it. So the risk of some new technology, they don't have to bear and stop a program in the middle of their execution, right? So that's what we do. We use these 10 programs to do that. And so on the left, what you see is almost like a natural progression from left to right, is we have a host of early low TRL programs. TRL 1 through 3, as we call it. It's ideation, getting new ideas, doing trade studies, doing concept studies, that what is the idea, what is the worth of that idea, what can you change from the current state of the art to the future. We have 5 programs in there. A number of them are targeted exactly to academia. So our space technology research grants, the first one, is completely targeting university programs. We have 5, and I'll talk a little bit more about details, so I'll wait to that. But we have a number of solicitations in there where universities were seeking the best ideas from universities. And when we stood up this organization, our maybe a little tongue-in-cheek, we wanted academia to solve our hard problems, not someone else's, all right? And so this is why we targeted to work with universities to get these bright ideas come through. We have internal Center Innovation Fund where we talked about doing internal development at NASA with the NASA workforce. That goes with Early Career Initiative where we take early staff who have just got hired on through a life cycle of a project very quickly in their life. So they don't have to, some of these space missions take 5, 8, 10 years. This is not to wait that long. It's some small technology development that you can do in a couple of years and go from the idea all the way through developing it and demonstrating it in a couple of year time frame, so they get the full life cycle of being a project manager, basically, right? We also look at non-traditional players. Ideas come from anywhere, right? And we want to tap that energy of people not even in the space sector, right, to come and solve our problems. And so we have this prizes, challenging, and crowdsourcing program where we put a challenge out, and we want people from around the country, from a garage to someone in another field, you know, it doesn't really matter, to help solve some of the intractable problems we have. That maybe the usual suspects have groupthink and don't think beyond those things, right? So we have the programs like that that you guys can be part of, right? It's open to anybody, right? And so we put these challenges out all the time. And then the NASA Innovation Advanced Concepts, NIAC. This program is actually looking 50, 60 years in the future of change, and the motto of that program is turning science fiction into science fact. You know, amazing things, the first CubeSat idea came through this program. The Mars helicopter that you saw in Perseverance, the idea came from that program. They have one, which is just, to me, amazing thinking about it. We just finished up on a concept study through that program, is using our sun as a gravitational lens to be able to photograph habitable worlds in distant locations. You have to go and put a spacecraft outside Pluto's orbit to get the focal length appropriate to use that sun. But they've worked out the physics of how to go about doing that. Now it's an engineering problem, right? We've kind of worked. So it's these visionary things that that are out there to be able to change the future, right? No one would have thought the capabilities in CubeSats that we have now that they're out. And we actually used it on an actual mission. The InSight mission, Mars InSight mission, had a CubeSat Marco basically tail it as around Mars as the lander was going down, and it did the relay communications back to Earth for that, right? So we used deep space at CubeSat to be able to do that. So that came from that visionary ideas. We work with small business and STTR, which is university also, so there's another way the university can come and play with doing tech development. And this is to target the energy of small business around the country, how they can solve some of the problems that we want and have, and then be able to leverage that. Then if those ideas pan out, those studies and concepts saying, hey, there is something here, we migrate them into our tech maturation programs that are there, and I'll talk about that. That's mid-TRL, where we go in a lab and try them out. Will the physics pan out with building hardware, what we call brass board, you know, a type of thing, in whatever form factor, just to see if it works out. And if it does pan out, then we want to go and demonstrate it in a relevant environment where that system was going to operate, in space or someplace else, right? And so then if that's the case, then we take it into our tech demonstrations program, and we have a number of programs I'll talk about where we actually go and demonstrate it, be it in orbit or in a test chamber on the ground or suborbital platforms, right, that they're flying it there. Whatever the right environment is to test out to see if that technology pans out, we test it through that. And so this is how we're constructed, of almost like a funneling thing of a lot of ideas first, the great ones out of that get matured a little bit further, and then from there we funnel it more into the ones that we want to go and demonstrate. And this is what we do, right, is to make investments of trying to figure out what it is we should invest in, and I'll talk about that. Here are some just highlights that just over the last year that I'll talk about, some of the things we've worked on, right? So on the top left, you see that video. That is an inflatable decelerator that was launched last November, almost a year ago, with a partnership with the Science Mission Directorate. It was their launch for a spacecraft that went into low Earth orbit, along with the United Launches Alliance, who had the rocket, of demonstrating an inflatable decelerator of how to slow things down when you're trying to land heavy payloads. So right now, when you go to Mars, we can only land about 1.5 metric tons. If we're going to send humans to Mars, we're going to need to be able to land at least 20 to 40 metric tons. We do not know how to do that. One of the issues with Mars is the atmosphere is so thin, you don't get enough deceleration. There's not enough drag with the capsules we have. The size of capsule you would need to be able to create a big capsule, we can't launch it. There is no shroud from a launch vehicle that will fit within it. And so this is an inflatable technology that you can squeeze it down and inflate it to the size you need so then you can land heavy payloads. So we demonstrated this in low Earth orbit, brought it back down, worked flawlessly, right? This is one of the big hurdles that and when we were grad students, we didn't know how to do. We talked about doing all these Mars missions that sound great, but we had all these unknowns of how to make that happen, right? And so in many ways, the current position I'm in now came full circle from when I started at NASA Langley long ago. My first assignments were doing human architectural studies. How do we get to Mars? how do we land things on Mars and stuff like that, you know, how to keep people alive for a 3-year journey. And during those trades, you know, we needed all these capabilities that didn't exist. So I did that for a few years. I decided to go and get a PhD. When I came back, I got into flight programs where I worked on some rovers to land on Mars and other capsules that came back to Earth with samples. And then after that, I couldn't do that work anymore. I needed to do something different. And then during the Obama administration, there was this talk about bringing a technology revolution back in the country to revitalize the base of the country and talk about standing up a technology organization at NASA. So it came full circle. It's like, hey, you know, in those 20 some odd years that I had left that initial work, we didn't make any investments in any of this stuff, and we still don't know how to do all this. And so by standing up this organization, I felt maybe with a little reins of power, we can make progress in these things that we needed that I remember from 30 years ago. And so that's when I made the shift from a technical background to more of a strategy background of how can we make this happen, right? And so that's why I'm in this organization now, is I stand it up. It was a little startup within this big conglomerate of an agency and did that, right? So again, you don't have to leave where you're working. If it's a big conglomerate, doesn't matter what kind of size company, there will be opportunities that you get to do within that own company about starting something up. So we were a mini startup, frankly, right? So I didn't have to quit NASA, do a startup and stuff. I was able to do it there. And I'm sure there are opportunities with no matter what company. You know, we have one alumni from Dianetics, similar things within that, right? So it's just a matter of opportunities opening up and then leveraging them when you get there. So that's one of the things we worked on. The one right next to it is Capstone, and I'll talk a little bit about it. It's a CubeSat around the moon right now in the special orbit that Gateway is going to be in, and it's doing the risk reduction of precision navigation and timing and communications from that orbit for Gateway before Gateway gets there, right? So it's doing risk reduction for that type of thing. Next to that is a small spacecraft called T-Bird, and it's an optical communication system on a CubeSat from low Earth orbit that can do 200 gigabits of transmission from low Earth orbit down in a CubeSat form factor, about the size of a bread box, right? You don't need big spacecraft. That's what we demonstrated. On this center left is solar propulsion. This is the new thrusters that are 12.5 kilowatt thrusters that are going to propel Gateway from low Earth orbit to its special orbit around the moon, the nonlinear rectangular orbit that it's going to be in. So we developed those thrusters. That is an actual picture. It is not, when the project started, we had an artist's rendition of it. That is an actual picture glowing the thruster in a test chamber. So no more pictures, it's no graphics, it's an actual picture of the system. It's being tested, it's going flawlessly, and they're going to build the flight units to put it on the spacecraft. So the technology advancement's going through that type of thing. Right next to that is the astronauts changing out, not changing out, but putting an overlay of the solar panels that were originally on the space station, the new version of the roll-out solar arrays. This is a new technology of solar arrays that are much lighter weight and a lot more power generation capability than the previous generation. And so it is producing a lot more power for the mass in there. And that's being installed on the space station. It flew on the DART mission. It's going to fly on Gateway as the power system. A lot more power, a lot less mass. As you know, trying to get something in orbit is very difficult when it's heavy. So that infused. Next to that is the Mars Perseverance rover on the surface. We had a technology demonstration on the rover called MOXIE, which is a in situ resource utilization demonstration, which is using the local resources and producing something that is consumable that we would want. So it is converted, I shouldn't say it was, it is planned to, it's worked and it's complete and finished now, converted the Mars atmosphere, carbon dioxide, into oxygen and stored it, right? So this is now when we send humans to Mars, we have demonstrated how we can use the resources there to generate oxygen for breathing purposes. Or you can cool it and now you have oxidizer for your propellants for doing it, right? So living off the land, right? So you don't have to bring all this stuff with you to make it more sustainable, this exploration that we want to do. So that's on there. The picture on the far right in the middle is the Talos engines. that we partnered with a company to create these engines that are very low temperature operation, right, on the moon in particular, where you don't need all this power to heat all the fuel and keep it warm and the engine's warm. So there you can avoid all this heating aspect of it and reduce the complexity of a lander to be able to still do the mission, right? On the moon is a very challenging environment that 14 days you're in the sun baking, and then 14 days you're in darkness and freezing to death, right? And how does a spacecraft survive in that every 14-day transition, right? And being able to still operate. So technologies to do that, and I'll talk a little bit further on that. And then quickly just go through the bottom. Nuclear propulsion, we just signed a agreement with DARPA to go in a partnership to create a nuclear thermal rocket that has twice the efficiency as chemical propulsion rockets, right? Allowing us to not only operate around the cislunar space, but when we go to Mars, this is one of the types of technology of advanced propulsion we need to reduce the amount of propellant we need to go further into the solar system, right? So we're going to demonstrate that in low Earth orbit, mid orbit in the coming handful of years. Right next to that, and I'll talk a little bit more on subsequent, is the deep space optical communications. Of course, bandwidth is a big issue when we get stuff from far away. Well, this is an optical demonstration at Mars distances, and I'll talk about that on a subsequent chart. We have a slew of small spacecraft technology activities. There's one in orbit right now that's doing swarm technology. So it's like, how does a hive of CubeSats work together to do something meaningful from observation perspective without having a big spacecraft trying to do it. So much more cost effective, much more flexible in how you approach it, how many you want. It's doing 4 because 4 was like the tipping point. If you can do 4, you can do 400, basically, right? So it's that type of aspect that we're doing demonstrations. And then a lot of mobility type things that we're investing in as we go further into the lunar surface, trying to do demonstrations. So that's a quick overview of things that we just did over the last year. So let me talk about how we go about making investments and what is it that we should invest in. You know, we are spending taxpayer dollars and we want to do it judiciously on the right things, right? So we have a framework that we go about figuring out how to invest it. So in the NASA strategic plan, our responsibility is to innovate and advance transformational space technologies. So we're not looking for incremental change. We're not interested in a 5% increase of something. We want 50% increase in something. You know, we want a step change, capability change going forward, right? And so that's what we're really looking, revolutionary type stuff. That's what we're looking to go after, right? We are informed when we do this by our customers and the needs that are out there. So the customers I talked to you about before is the science missions that we're doing at NASA and the human spaceflight missions that we do at HANS. So they have their own architectures and plans of what they want to do in the future, decades out, between now and decades out. And we use that as input to us about the types of missions they want to do and what kind of technologies they need to in order to do those, right? Can we help to make them more affordable, more faster, more capable to be able to go do that? So we use those as inputs to our thinking process of what we invest in. We talk to industry. What are their things? Now, there is a vibrant space sector. Private industry doing their own things. They have their own strategic plans. So we talk to them on an ongoing basis of, hey, what are you guys interested in doing? Maybe there is synergy between what you guys want and what we want, and we partner together and do that. And we have a lot of partnerships now with industry to make that happen, right? So all that boils in. Earlier this past year, the agency, NASA, put out the Moon to Mars blueprint objectives. This was the objectives of what exploration NASA is looking to do going into the future. And so this is a big blueprint. If you haven't read it, I would suggest you go skim through it, at the very least, to give you an idea of the types of things NASA is looking to do for the nation for exploration, Moon to Mars, right? And it talks about all the things. The objectives fall into 4, as you see there: science, transportation and habitation, infrastructure, and operations. We were asked, my organization, Space Technology, was asked to lead the infrastructure objective out of that blueprint, right? Doesn't mean we're doing it all, but we were asked to lead that activity from that. perspective. So we will work with all the mission directors in NASA to enable those blueprint objectives going forward. All that feeds into our strategic framework. And I'll talk that a little bit more. And this is how we think about what we go and invest in. But before I get into that chart, let me say, what is it that we're trying to do? You know, part of is not just technology development and capability increases for NASA and the nation, but it's also about leadership for the country, right? Part of our charter, when we were stood up by the Obama administration many ways, long ago, and still to this day, is national needs. And so we're here to help lead the nation in the space economy as best as we can through the knobs we have. And so what we're trying to do is really these three major pillars of leading in the country, of advancing U.S. space technology, innovation, and competitiveness, engaging technology-driven economic growth, emphasizing expanding the space economy. It's been booming over the last 5 years, and we want to support that as much as we can to make it even better, and inspiring and developing a diverse and powerful U.S. aerospace technology community. That's partly why I'm here too, to talk to you all, hopefully for you to come into the space sector. If not in another sector, the space sector needs all these other sectors to do what we do. So just in any sector, right, to go out and do what you guys will do to be part of all these types of things, right? And so, frankly, we want these diverse ideas. And in order to be an innovative technology organization, we want ideas from left field, right? And trying to figure out how to structurally bring that in on an ongoing basis, right? From non-traditional suspects. People who don't think about space but have this kernel of an idea that no one else in the space sector has thought about that can change the game, right? And if you want to look at the classic example of that, you can go back to Henry Ford and the assembly line for automaking, right? He got the idea from a slaughterhouse of how meat production was done. That's how we brought that up. That brought the price point down for cars to a thing, completely out of a mechanical automotive process, right? It's that type of stuff, right? So this is what we want. We want people who aren't even thinking about space helping to come up with ideas about how we can change something, right? And come up with an intractable problem that no one seems to, the usual suspects can't seem to get our arms around and handle. Get that. And so part of all this is trying to bring as much diverse ideas into the system that we do so that we can get these great ideas. Yeah, I won't read that. You guys can keep the charts so you guys can kind of look at them and review them as go forward. In particular, our strategy framework of what is it that we're doing and what you guys can either do for research or when you leave and start working someplace, the types of things you want to engage with us going forward. It's in one chart, our strategy. Right? And so we've broken our strategy down into what we call thrusts, outcomes, and capabilities, right? And so we have 4 technical thrusts. And then the 5th thrust is that lead that I talked about in the previous chart about for the nationwide. 4 technical thrusts that we invest in. I will just boil it down into the vernacular. Go, land, live, and explore. Typically what we want to do in this space, we want to go somewhere. So propulsion systems, how can we get there better, faster, more efficiently, more reliably, so technologies to allow getting someplace in a more capable way. Once we get somewhere, what we typically want to do is land somewhere, right? So how can we land things more safely, more precisely, more mass coming down aspect of it, right? So technologies that allow that, right? Once we land, we hopefully won't have the spacecraft survive, right? It didn't crash, right? We're crashing, I guess, as landing, but survive. So how does it survive, right? Once it gets there. So rovers, be it a robotic system or a human element of some kind, right? That we need habitation systems or humans themselves, right? When you're there, right? And so, as I mentioned, the lunar environment, 14 days, extremely hot. 14 days, one of the coldest places in the solar system, right? Or in the universe, in fact, right? How does the system survive going back and forth from that, right? So technologies for long-term activity on surviving on the surface, no matter what planetary body you're talking about, or even in space, right? And then once they survive, we didn't send them to just for the sake of it. They are cool, way cool, frankly, but we didn't just send them just for the sake of it, right? We want to do something, which is to explore, to find out about wherever it is that we're going, what's there, and help to get a better understanding of the solar system and the universe we live in, right? And so technologies for that. And so everything we invest in is in those 4 thrusts. We can bin them into the 4 thrusts. In those 4 thrusts, we have identified the outcomes that we want to achieve. So for example, my background's in entry, descent, landing, so landing type stuff. One of the outcomes is develop technologies to land payloads within 50 meters of accuracy and avoid landing hazards. Right now, we land blindly, right? We're going there. If there's a big rock and you land on it, it's going to be a game over, not a good day, right? So we are developing technologies where we can reduce the size of the footprint to a very precise level, maybe even land next to something that's pre-positioned before, right? We certainly don't want astronauts and rovers having to go like tens of kilometers because you landed over here when all this other stuff's over there, right? So precision landing to be able to do that, and safely, right? How can it do hazard avoidance as it's coming down, be able to see, scan the horizon, the surface, what's there, can it divert away to be able to land safely type of thing. Technologies like that. So one of those type of outcomes, right? And out of those 17 outcomes, we've identified 18 capabilities that we need. That's in the far right column. Capabilities like, advanced power, entry, descent, landing, precision landing, cryogenic fluid management, things like that are capability areas. So if you look at those are technical capabilities that probably many of you all and the professors here work on, right? So this is what we're investing in. You know, if you can see I would be surprised if none of you guys can't see something that you guys are working on that would align here with us, right? For every one of those 18 capabilities, we have subject matter experts that kind of looked at the current state of the art and where is it that we want to go? What is the target? What is the future that we want to enable? And so they've identified those, so they've created these envision future priorities, which is our strategic outcome that we want for those capabilities internally. It's on the website. You can see there, techport.nasa.gov/framework. You can download it and look at them for whatever area that you're interested in. And it identifies what is it that we're targeting to give you guys a sense of where we're headed, right? We use this to, once we did it internally, we put it out there for industry to provide feedback, and we unveiled them last year, a year ago at Ascend conference, space conference that occurs. And so this is what we're doing, right? And we got this not just because we wanted to, we took it from input from all our customers, externally, got feedback, and then from that we stitched together what we think is the right things to go after, right? And that's what we didn't just do it in the vacuum, right? In the hopes that, hey, someone will use it if we do it, right? Which is very important. We always, when we stood up the organization, we had the viewpoint that there's 2 ways to fail. One of them is acceptable, one is completely unacceptable. An acceptable failure is you tried something hard, didn't quite work out. Maybe you didn't achieve all the metrics you wanted, type of thing. Maybe it didn't work at all, but you learned a lot by doing it. That's an acceptable failure. What's an unacceptable failure is you tried something hard, it worked even better than you planned. Amazing, flawless, right? Perfect. And then just sat on the shelf and no one adopted it, right? You just wasted all this energy, resources for doing this and it's not being used, right? That is unacceptable. And so when we do look at what we're investing in, we want to make sure that there is someone on the other side who wants this and will take it from where we leave it, right? And bring it to fruition on a mission, or industry takes it and commercializes it, whatever it happens to be, right? So that is very important in those aspects of it, right? We're not just shooting in the dark, hey, someone may use this, some of that, no. Part and parcel, we're using taxpayer dollars, so there comes a lot of responsibility with that in general, but it's just wasteful otherwise too, right? You're not just, do you really want to say you worked on, created all these great things and then no one used it, right? On there. And so that's what we're working on. And so I think if you want to know where we're headed, you can look right at these things to get an idea and see what type of research you want to do. And I'll talk about in a couple of programs that you guys can actually leverage to work with us to try to make that happen. The agency put, for the first time, this Blue Mars Blueprint objectives, and that is what's driving how we invest going forward, is because this is where all our missions are going, right? It provides an understanding of how all that comes together between all the different facets of NASA to enable the objectives that we're looking to do. And they go into science, inspiration, and national posture about enlarge the big aspects of what it is that we're trying to enable by doing these types of missions, right? In those objectives, the infrastructure objectives, these are the lunar ones. There are 9 lunar objectives, right? And you kind of identified here. And you can boil them down, so we can bucket those 9 into 3 buckets. And this is what we're looking at and how we're looking about investing. The first 3 you can look at as our utilities. Just like when you create a development here on the Earth, in your neighborhood, you need some utilities there to do anything, right? So we're looking to first create these utilities that you need before you can do anything else, like power, navigation and timing, and communications. Because without that, you can't do anything, right? And so if we're going to make a sustainable lunar presence and grow any commercial activity on there, along with what NASA is looking to do, you need to expand the infrastructure to be able to do that. And so you need some type of infrastructure. So the first 3 objectives are starting to create the capabilities you need to get that infrastructure in place, right? So all the technologies for that. So we're working on that. The next 3 go into longer term presence on the lunar surface, be it robotically or human, right? Beyond just quick missions, right? So they're going there. So technologies that allow us to do more mobility on the surface, manufacturing, development and stuff. So we're starting early developments of how can you use the resources off the lunar surface to create consumables that we can use. So the regolith on the moon's surface, you can extract oxygen from it. So that's oxygen you don't have to bring. Okay? You can actually get a lot of metals from that during the processing of it, right? So we term this ISRU, in situ resource utilization. And so there is a lot of resources you could just go do right from there that you don't have to bring from Earth, right? Which makes these missions much more sustainable and capable and cost-effective going forward. So we're developing technologies to create that next step after the utilities of capabilities that are being able to be leveraged going forward. And then the last 3 are really industrial scale up of those things, right? We're going to demonstrate with these in the middle 3. How can you maybe do hundreds of kilograms of oxygen extraction, storage, metals, and stuff like that. But when you get to really make the lunar surface and the activities more commercial, they want to do metric tons of stuff, right? And so how can you scale that to those size things and working on systems to be able to do that? So that's how the objectives are laid out. We're starting that plan. Here's our lunar surface strategy of doing demonstrations on the surface to evolve all these technologies to a point where we can figure out if they're going to work or not, and then could a mission take that on going forward to adopt them. So we're leveraging these commercial lunar landers that NASA has procured through our CLIPS program, which are going to land these demonstrations that we have for technology, but they're also going to be used for a lot of scientific examinations on the lunar surface as well, right, by the Science Mission Directorate. And so the initial ones are going to start launching maybe in a couple of months here, right? From the likes of Astrobiotic and the Intuitive Machines, right? They're going to be the initial ones going into the. So we have a number of demonstrations that we're going to do on those missions coming up. And I'll just talk about a couple of them. We have this on Astrobiotics lander, a terrain relative navigation to help precision landing as closer to one step closer to what we really want to do. So they're going to demonstrate that. We have dust shield experiment. There is a lot of dust on the lunar surface. It's very abrasive because there's no weathering of it to round them out. And so how do you mitigate for all that dust, right? Getting into everything. So figuring those things out. Plume interaction. When you land, as you see on Earth, like a helicopter coming down, you get all this dust up type of thing coming up from there, right? trying to get models improvement for that so that we can predict what it looks like to be able to compensate for it as we been around. Later on, next year, we have this IM2 mission, Intuitive Mission 2, where it's Space Tech's mission itself, and we're going to demonstrate 3 things on there. One is a Prime 1 drill to characterize the regolith where we land, to try to figure out what's on there. That's going to be a risk reduction for the Viper lander, the rover, that's going to go later on by the Science Mission Directorate to traverse that, to do risk reduction for it so that it can get better understanding of how it can perform on there. We also have a Nokia 4G LTE communication demonstration on there. If we're going to do all this stuff on the lunar surface, you're going to have all these assets, be it rovers, landers, buildings, if we build stuff of some type of habitat and things like that, all over the place. And so it's going to have to communicate. There's going to have to be some type of mesh network of communications around, right? So developing this capability to see if this technology will work on the surface to connect all those assets together. And then a demonstration of a hopper, not quite a rover, but a hopper, where it can take much greater leaps, go inside of a crater, get a sense of what's there, be able to come out, go to another crater. So much more capable distance-wise than a rover can go. So doing that. As we go further to the right over the next 10 years, we want to start doing this in situ resource utilization demonstrations. Can we actually turn the regolith into consumables? And so we're looking to do demonstrations of that ISRU. In order to do that, we need power. So demonstrations of how we can get continuous power on the surface, all right, from there. In order to process the material, we got to excavate it to bring it to the plant, right? So excavation capability, right, that you need on the surface. It's all going to be done autonomously, so capabilities of how can you do that autonomously, right? So developing those capabilities to be able to do that, right? So we're laying the foundations with that, with a number of missions or demonstrations that we would like to do to that. Ultimately leading to a pilot plant where we can start creating, metric tons of type of thing, large quantity, not an industrial scale up, but large enough to say that if that works, you can easily scale up to whatever size you want thereafter, right? We're looking for continuous power, so efficient surface power demonstrate, microreactor, to be able to put on the moon, to be able to power this, right? If on the solar panels don't work very well on the 14 days of night, right? And so how do you get power for that long of a duration? And so we're working on a microreactor system along with the Department of Energy and others players to be able to put that come to fruition. So that's a high-level strategy there. Our overall aspect is, we're going to demonstrate things where it makes sense. Low Earth orbit, cislunar orbit, do things on the moon to demonstrate as many things we can do on the moon for the use on the moon, but there's a lot of things that feed forward to Mars as well as we will eventually go to Mars. And so a lot of the technologies that we will demonstrate on the moon directly feed forward, like the fission surface power reactor. We will need a power source on Mars from that perspective, right? So this kind of just shows you more of the flow of we're looking to demonstrate these things in the appropriate vicinity of where it makes sense and then feed that forward to future applications. So then I'm going to just walk you through a number of those programs so you guys have a little sense of the programs we're doing. And then I'm happy to take questions and answers after that, right? This is a technology readiness scale from 1 through 7. We don't really go to 9. After 7, it's basically the final integration piece with whatever system you're going to put on, whatever you're going to fly with, right? So we really leave it to them type of thing. So we really only go to TRL 7. And so what you see here is all of our programs, what TRL scale we target. So we have a bunch of programs that target this early career, low TRL concepts and ideas to get that. If they're successful, we migrate them to our mid-TRL programs. And if they're successful at that, then we migrate them to our higher TRL programs to actually go and demonstrate them. And so this is kind of just showing you where each program fits into the larger picture, to how it integrates together. And so now I'm just going to walk through and give you some examples of what each program tries to do and things like that. Our demonstration program, which is our largest dollar amount program, is actually flying things in space, typically, we do things on the ground too, so it's not just that, of putting an integrated demonstration together of how things work. So that lofted mission that I showed that inflated, this program was responsible for that. And so we go and demonstrate it wherever this, the relevant environment, be it ground testing, suborbital, or orbital. This doesn't matter. And so you see a couple of things that the solar propulsion system we talked about, fission surface power that we're in the middle of trying to develop, and then cryofluid management to keep these propellants cool, because if you don't, they're going to boil off, and then you're not going to have propellant anymore, right? And so capabilities where they can stay cold and a liquid for hundreds of days at a time. Right now, the state of the art is 8 hours, right? So if you're going to be out there more than 8 hours, you're not going to have much fuel type of thing. That's current, right? So we're looking to and working with industry to make that happen. Let me just pause on deep space optical communication, because it's on its way to the Psyche asteroid right now, and it's starting to do some of the demonstrations as it's going on there. So this is how we can get much more higher bandwidth from far distances from Mars. One of the things that is a problem is, when you're at those distances, the amount of data you can send is very limited. And in order to send a lot of data, you need a huge power sense doing a radio frequency communication systems, right? And so it becomes very massive. And so it's not really practical when you go really farther and out to try to bring large amounts of data back. And so if you actually look at how things have evolved, early on, the issues in doing space missions was the acquisition system. Until the microelectronic revolution over the last 15, 20 years, we couldn't really gather a lot of data, right? We didn't have the systems to be able to take really precise pictures and all that data and be able to even store it, right? So it was very grainy, the pictures and stuff like that, right? So the bottleneck was not having a technical capability to actually even gather the data. Over the last 20 years, the microelectronics like you have in your pocket, right? This thing, stuff like this. Now we can get terabytes of data. So the bottleneck, but now we can't transmit it, that much data, right? So the bottleneck moved from acquisition to transmission. And so this technology is trying to move the bottleneck to another step after that, which was maybe what you do with it, right? AI hopefully will help fix that type of thing, right? Ultimately, the bottleneck would be great if it's just money, right? You just need more money, right? Happening, not technical. So this optical communication system is in the middle of that, you say, is flying on the Psyche spacecraft, and it's going to use two optical terminals here on the surface of the Earth in California to communicate with it, right? And so here's the trajectory that you see going about to Mars, past Mars actually. And so you see the trajectory of where Psyche is, this purple. It's going to make a couple of revs around the middle part of the solar system going out there. And all the dots that you see there in blue are where DSOC is going to transmit to try to get this demonstration of optical communication at Mars distances. So you thought precision pointing from low Earth orbit down was hard. Try that at Mars distances. And frankly, I am just amazed at the ingenuity of humans, of someone coming up with the idea of how you can do this. Even fathoming it, forget about the audaciousness of it, right? Right? So this is the type of ideas we want, right? That could completely change the game, right? About being able to get technology into systems so that we can do bigger and better things, right? The other demonstration programs we have is our suborbital flight opportunities program and our small spacecraft program. We manage them together because there's a lot of synergy between them. The suborbital, the flight opportunities program is, we don't do tech dev in this program, we just buy a ticket for principal investigators and technologists who have some gadget they want to test on either zero-G spacecraft, aircraft, excuse me, on a zero-G aircraft, or some of the new suborbital platforms that we have with Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin, right, with those Shepard and flights. So we pick payloads from universities, industry, NASA, it doesn't matter where it is, and buy the ticket so that they can fly and iterate on their design of what it is before we try to fly it in orbit. The small spacecraft program is going to take small spacecraft form factors and increasing the capability that you can do just as much with a small spacecraft as you can do with a big spacecraft. And we're developing the technologies in all areas of propulsion, communications, attitude control, data acquisition, whatever it is, thing there. And so the one here is, let me just, I think, we go here, Capstone. Size of a microwave, flying around on the moon right now in the near rectilinear halo orbit, which Gateway is going to be in, to test it out of what that orbit changes over time are, what precision and navigation you need to be able to do that, positioning, station keeping, all that. So it's demonstrating that in a CubeSat form factor, right? From start, so unfortunately COVID kind of interrupted it's delayed it, but from start to launch, we were looking to try to do this in 18 months. Still did pretty good, about 20 some odd months type of thing. COVID obviously froze the world in so many ways, right? But still, being able to do this faster. And so our program director for this has a nice saying. He wants to change the pace of space. So small spacecraft allows you to do that, right? You can do this much more rapidly and quicker than big systems that take a lot of testing and integration and stuff like that. So a lot of stuff going on in there. Our mid-TRL program, tech maturation, and like I said, we're trying to just do developments in the lab, on the ground, of increasing the capability to try to see if the physics will pan out, right? These are the different areas that we talk about, and this is kind of like those 18 capability areas. They map pretty much pretty close to that in all of them. So, like I said, any of the discipline areas you guys are working here at the university probably falls into one of these, right? We created, as part of that program, the Lunar Surface Innovation Initiative. And this was a community that they're looking to foster, and we have fostered, started it, to community perspectives and engagement on how we're going to do lunar surface exploration and innovation. And so I don't know if NC State, I should have looked it up, NC State is part of this now. There is a Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium, part of LSII, that meets twice a year with various things. We just had one at Pittsburgh. There's 600 organizations part of it, from industry, academia, nonprofits, and stuff. So if NC State isn't, I would suggest you guys take a look at it and be part of the community of helping to define what is it that we're going to do on the moon, right? And there's a bunch of workshops they talked about. How do we get standards on certain things, interoperability on other things, how to go about some of the phasing of it, of development and stuff. So basically a free way to get engaged, to get involved in the process, right? And so another mechanism to really get part of space tech development and larger exploration. We just put out last week this RFI, request for information, about doing our Lift 1 demonstration. And this is the one where we want to demonstrate ISRU on the surface, an initial demonstration, kind of like MOXIE did on Mars. We want to do a similar demonstration on the moon with our Lift 1 Lunar Infrastructure Foundational Technologies demonstration. And here are some of the things that we are putting out there is like, hey, we're thinking about this and we're looking for information from people, whoever out there. What do you think? Does this make sense? Looking for industry to feed in. It's like, hey, does this make sense to you? What are you guys planning to do? What are your thoughts? To help us refine how we should do this and what should be involved and put in place to try to inform us better about what is it that we go forward with. Now moving on to our early stage programs, and there are a handful of them. This is all on one chart, but I'll go individually there before I wrap up. The one program here that is directly aligned to universities is our Space Technology Research Grants. This is for universities, of how all universities can help us do the next generation of space technology. And so we have a number of solicitations. We have graduate research opportunities for students. And this is really an opportunity where it's a triad of things. You have the graduate researcher. We don't call them students. We call them researchers. The advisor at the school, and a NASA mentor. or it could be from another institution, like Applied Physics Lab or something. It doesn't have to be another, but another government institution or something like that. Those three work together with the graduate researcher to improve some capability. And so on an annual basis, we take grant opportunities for graduate students to fund them for 4 years, 5 years for the PhD, if you want to do tech development for what we need. There are topic areas that, actually, no, this is pretty open for what is it for the researcher and their advisor, their thing of proposing to us, and we go through evaluation and make awards on an annual basis. You can go to the website and figure out the timing and everything like that. We have solicitations for faculty with early career faculty in early stage innovation for providing grant funding for doing technology development. And we've put topics out about the types of things we want, and we rotate the topics on an annual basis for different things, the aspect of it, but way to get your great ideas and develop them further for our use there. And then the last two is something we added subsequent to when we first stood up the program, our lunar surface technology research opportunities, our luster ones, about how do we take things that the university had come up and actually maybe fly them somewhere. So maybe actually being able to go and not just do it on the lab here, but just directly go there. So an opportunity for that we do every so often. And then something we have undertaken more wholeheartedly recently is our Space Technology Research Institutes. This is a partnership between universities to come together to help solve an intractable problem. So we put out a topic area that we would want a consortium of universities to get together to help push the envelope of being able to solve it. And so a few of them we had is on, for that is just this last one we had done. One was standards and certification for 3D manufactured metals, right? How do we go when you create a 3D part, how can you certify that it has the properties that you think it has, right? A way of doing that. We had an earlier one for entry, descent, and landing to be able to do much more integrated capability between the aerothermodynamics and the flight dynamics to come together. We've had one about autonomy, about autonomous systems of how you operate habitation systems and things like that. And then one of the initial ones we had was called Cubes, where it's looking to use biological processes to create medicines and others, so that when we go on this 3-year voyage, when we do send humans to Mars, you're able to manufacture those along the way, right, as you need them. Our NIAC, as I mentioned, is our far out 60-year visionary program, and it is open to anybody. So typically when we make these awards, for whatever reason, it comes back to a third academia, third industry, and third from government. It just happens then. Not that we're trying to make that happen, but just all these ideas always turns out to be a third, a third, a third. But here is open, no topics, just open to just bright ideas that people want to submit to. Our prizes, challenge, and crowdsourcing. We have different sets of prizes and stuff. We have some smaller crowdsourcing type things where we're just looking for quick solutions for various things. We have like 60 of them on an annual basis of these smaller activities. And then we have these larger centennial challenges of being able to get ideas from the non-traditional thought processes of individuals coming in there. One is like break the ice lunar challenge, about if there's this supposed ice in the Aitken Basin in the southern Poland region of the moon, how do you get at it, and how do you convert it if it's ice and make it and stuff like that. So challenges for that you all can be participants of. Our SBIR program is for small business. However, the STR aspect of it has a university component that gets coupled with small business. And so here's a way that universities can work with small businesses in the area and propose to doing the tech development that we're looking to. So more information on that. It's all on our website too, so if you could Google for more information. And I think this is my last program chart, our technology transfer program. So we're not just about creating a technology. What we want to do is, of course, transition it into space applications, but not stop there. Everything we do, we want to be able to transition into other sectors terrestrially. So the thing in your pocket, this camera that is on your iPhone, was a NASA technology to do pictures of stars. It meandered its way over 20 some odd years into this form factor into your pocket. Not design. We are being much more deliberate now of taking everything we do and trying to transition it into terrestrial applications for commercial activity. Right? Space, I'm a big fundamental believer that the things we do for space can change the game for everything terrestrial. And how can we be more deliberate in making that happen? And so this program transitions all the technology we have licensed, technology that for companies to come and use to turn into products, and our software. And so it's out there. Universities can do it. We actually have a number of programs out of this called TTU, Technology Transfer University, where they will come and talk with universities about how to take some of our licenses and software and turn it into the business school-wise of some type of small business. And there has been many that has been started through this process, engaging with the university. So here's another way that you all can be involved from a university perspective on doing this. These are free, right? All these patents and everything, taxpayer dollars. So they're free for you guys to come and take a look at and create something that hasn't been created before with it. Just a couple of things to talk about the winglets on airplanes that's been transitioned from there. Some of the rocket technology for stopping the vibration during launch, that has been transitioned into buildings. It's not the old civil engineering having a big heavy mass in a building that damps out. It's not that approach. You can avoid that heavy mass type of thing from the rocket. It's been transitioned into civil construction companies and stuff being able to do that, right? And then the CMOS technology I talked to you about right there, and that is in your pocket. All from space-based applications. Exploration is a team sport. Get involved. We want your ideas. More of those ideas, the more the best ideas bubble up, and we can actually make a difference for the future, right? So it is within, and I'll end where I started in that. It's an amazing time, very exciting time, given the plethora of companies that are out there. So you guys have a lot of pathways going forward of being able to leverage. You can also just go to our website, techport.nasa.gov, and see all the technologies we're investing in. You can just search them there by program, by just technical area. You can just do a search of, hey, I want to see anything about avionics. You can put it in there, and it'll come up with what we're doing. So it's all a database that's open source out there on the web. And let me leave you with the final chart here, which is a few years ago tried to get this inclusive aspect of getting all these ideas from non-traditional. Our organization put out The First Woman. It's about, it's not a comic strip, as my daughter told me, it's a graphic novel. No such thing as comic strips anymore, comic books. It's about first woman explorer on the moon, talking about the exploits of her and trials and tribulations for her to go on there. So 2 years ago, we put that out there. Well, we just released, there's a cliffhanger at the end of it. So the cliffhanger is over now. Issue number 2 just came out 2 weeks ago. And so for your own consumption, or if you have younger brothers and sisters or nieces and nephews, someone to point to, you can also do it online. And I think they have like a 3D thing with your iPhone or something aspect with it too. So I'll just leave that with you of how to kind of get the word out about space and how you can be part of it, basically, going forward. So with that, I will stop and then I thank you for your time and happy to take any questions.
All right. If you have a question, raise your hand and I will come by and then speak into the mic.
Hi, thank you for your lecture. Excuse me. I was just curious about the solar electric propulsion and kind of what tests are being done now and like what requirements will it need to meet before you can implement it onto the spacecrafts?
So I don't think I can probably cite the requirements on there. The aspect was really, the high level one is 12 kilowatts. Of course, there's all these other ones to enable that an aspect of it. But can you get a thrust level at that magnitude to be able to power the gateway to where it needs to go? And so high level wise, that is the requirement for it to achieve. And in order to get those 12 kilowatts, you got to have all these other ones that you need, but I couldn't recite them offhand with that. If you go online, you can probably find it on that tech port of what is it that's trying to achieve, I'm sure. So.
Hi, I wanted to ask, what experiences did you have in your more technical roles earlier in your career that you feel prepared you in unexpected ways for your more leadership-focused roles?
Very good question. So I would say maybe two things in particular. One is I'm a believer that you need a foundation to start off on. So if you have a deep knowledge of some technical area, right, to springboard from. So having that as a base to kind of help you think through things. I rely on that, what I do for going forward, right, for sure. We invest in all these different capability areas. I certainly don't know all of those by any means, right? But the thought process is very similar from how you think about your own technical area that you're trying to get expertise in. And then the other aspect is, I think going through a life cycle of a project. I was fortunate to be in a number of those missions that I started from an idea all the way to landing and going all through the phases of it. Now, I certainly didn't have a role in all aspects of the spacecraft, right, but my portion of it. And it gave you an understanding of how to think about things at different times and how to schedule all that out, with the milestones, what you need to do. So it kind of gave you how you storyboard what it is that you need to do in a way. And so I rely on those two things, I would say, all the time, right? Because we have to make investment decisions. And when someone's pitching some idea to you, they say, oh, it's going to take this much money, this much time, this is what it's going to do. I rely on that to say, it's like, is that anywhere true that they can actually do that type of thing? And so I do rely on that experience that I went through to say, they're saying, oh, they can do it in a year and a half. And I'm like, that complication? There's no way, right? And so it helps me get an understanding and reading of now because I went through that experience. And if I hadn't gone through that, I think it would make the job a lot harder, frankly.
I was going to ask him a very tough technical question.
And so, Prayson, I wanted to ask you, I worked with Prayson like a long time ago on Stardust, and I mean, just tell you, he's had a really distinguished career. I mean, I worked on one thing that flew, and I was really happy. He did 5, and that's really unusual at NASA. And just what I wanted to ask you for these young people here is, looking back on it, what do you think gave you the most joy and meaning in doing your job? I mean, that's probably, these people are entering their careers now, and what would you tell them, to what really mattered?
Yeah. As I said, I didn't plan any of it, frankly. I knew I liked space. I wanted to do something space. And, I kind of always tongue-in-cheek say, some people are called to greatness, others have it thrusted upon them, and others like me just back into things, right? Part of it is timing. There was certainly luck in there. If one of those missions didn't work and crashed, let's say, right, would I have gotten an opportunity to work on something else thereafter? Probably not, right? So some of those things happen right there. My view always has been is choose something you enjoy, right, doing. Third of your life you sleep. a third you work, and then the other third is with all this other stuff. You got to do the laundry, do the dishes, run an errand here, type of thing. So there's not much time to enjoy what you're doing. And if you choose what you really like to do, you expand that third of the work into that enjoyment part of it, right? And so I was fortunate to find something. Now, I don't think I would ever say that this is what I wanted to do. I always felt if you don't know, there's some people know what they want to do. Others, I still don't know, frankly, what I wanted to do, and still don't know what I want to do. But I always felt that if you choose something that's worthwhile, the rest will take care of itself, right? And so, is it worthwhile what you're doing, right? Do you like, does it force you to think in different ways? Does it make it, does it challenge you, right? That's what gets you up in the morning. And I remember I'm reading books with my kids, and I read this, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, Who Am I books. This is pretty small and things. And there's one about the Wright brothers. We were going to go to Kitty Hawk for spring break and stuff, so I said, hey, let me get this, we'll read it. And in one of the lines in there, it had one of the Wright brothers, and I'm not sure which one, it's like, happiness, he said, was going to bed and looking forward to waking up the next morning working on a problem you really are engaged in. And in many ways, that's kind of how my mindset was thing. It's like, hey, when you wake up, you go and work on something you really enjoy doing and stuff like that, right? And so that's kind of what kind of kept me pushing there. And then some of the speakers said it yesterday, it's hard work. As the saying goes, anything worthwhile requires hard work. So there is no magic bullet, all right? It's just day in, day out. Just do your hard work, right? That's it, right? And then, and I'm an example of it. If you do that, opportunities will open up for you, right? And timing is part of it, luck is part of it, right? But just keep pushing forward. Don't dwell on the past so much. Dwell on it for lessons learned and stuff like that. But move forward. There's going to be other opportunities. And as I talked to some of the students, saying, yesterday, I thought I would never leave what we used to do, Dave, right? It was so great, amazing, right? You're working on stuff out of this world, right? Landing things on the planet. But you change as a person over time. And I basically woke up saying, I can't do that anymore. Right? Landing on something else on another planet, right? You need another challenge. And so life does assert itself, and you got to be just open to, okay, now I got to figure something else out and move forward with that. And and I think if you think about trusting yourself, preparing yourself, I think you set yourself up for the next stage and other opportunities that come. And then that's kind of how I've thought about it, really, right? I've never had a 5-year plan that at this point I want to be here, and another 5-year plan I want that. I've never had that per se. So if it is that someone like, great, there's nothing wrong with it, but I guess just an example of you don't have to have one.
Thank you, Prayson. Good to see you again. I have a question for you that's kind of in two parts. I am a child of Apollo. I imagine you kind of are too. One of the things that got you inspired to go into aerospace engineering was the Apollo program. That was 50 years ago. If you asked me when I was an 8-year-old where we would be on the moon today in 2023, I would have had a vastly different vision of what the reality has been. So my question to you is, if you could project yourself to the end of the careers of some of the folks in this room, 50 years, 40, 50 years into the future, what are we doing as humanity on the moon specifically, not just living and working, but have we abandoned the moon to go on to Mars? Have we turned it into a national park? Is it a factory? What are we doing in your mind 50 years from now that some of the folks will see? And the second part is, what is NASA doing on the moon 50 years from now? Anything?
Oh, it's a good question. Wow. See, so I say it wasn't Apollo that inspired me. I would say I was too young when it's there, right? And I don't even think the last mission, I don't think I recall really. What was me that kind of got me going? I love science fiction, but I remember when the Voyager launches occurred. And what just made me go, wow, was at the time, and of course graphics on TV were so pathetic now if you look at it, but way back when, they showed how you can do swing-bys of the planets to hurl yourself further out. It just blew my mind, right? And that's when I kind of was like, wow, maybe there's, this, and I was, of course, when you see some pictures of other planets and stuff like that. It's just an inspiring from that. But that's what kind of got me more into really thinking about being in this, doing something in space versus just liking science fiction, right? Type of thing there. So I hope that in 50 years type of thing that is that we have a continuous presence on the moon. And I'm not sure what that will look like. If we were here 5 years ago talking about this, I think so much has changed in just 5 years that what that future will look like, it would be very different now than just 5 years ago, given the activity that's happening in the space sector. So I hope when you guys are 30 years into your career and stuff like that, that we have a sustainable future on the sustainment presence on the moon, which in whatever form, robotic, human type of thing, something like that, as we hopefully push further out into the solar system as we go, right? Of course, setting the stage for going to another planet at some point, Mars, and in my view, we will go one day. The question is when, and part of it is what you all want, right? It happens because it's a national priority, and you guys will be in the driver's seat for what those national priorities are. And so if that is what you guys want to push from a national perspective, like our, I guess our equivalent of people back in the late 50s and early 60s to push to going to the moon, right? Same thing. And so I hope at the very least we do that. It would be, in my view, a great step in 50 years if that happens. Routine excursions, presence on a continuous basis on the lunar surface, and then stepping from there to further parts of the solar system.
Christmas holidays on the moon.
Right.
All right, thanks, Person again. And then, Jack, are you coming to take a picture? He's coming. This is a small token here, just to remember your trip. Maybe we should do a red jacket for this.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Here,
No.
and a good little, this was, can hang in the wolf one.
Oh, great.